day. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
You're listening to Arkansas Preps Weekly on Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
And here we go.
What is up, everybody? Welcome in to episode number 38 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network alongside Kevin Bohannon. My name's Kyle Sutherland. Kevin, they remember what you do in November, as the saying goes, and we are all into November now, and we've got 1 week left of the football regular season. Still got some things to figure out and plenty of chaos. This is honestly, from a headache standpoint, one of my least favorite weeks of the year. I know you can relate. Of course, thankfully we got Barry Grooms and all those guys who go through these potential playoff matchups that help us kind of get started as far as where we're going to look at what some of the matchups we could see in the next round. Kevin, actually, you're already in that same category too. You're well ahead of me. I've got a few things lined up. Yeah, you're already in the zone. I am well behind on that. I've kind of looked at a few things here and there, but I don't have anything drafted out quite like that. But crazy to think it is the final week of the regular season. It just, as we'd say every week, it just flies by way too quick. It's like Monday's here, and then you blink, and then you're at a game Friday. So really excited to get the final week going here of the regular season. At least we have plenty to talk about. Before we get into it, I want to remind everybody, if you are not subscribed already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on one of the audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We are there. So, Kevin, let's jump into it, starting in Class 7A as we always do. The Pulaski Academy Bruins, no trap game this week, 47-6 over Little Rock Southwest after a close one with Cabot, I guess, a week prior. Cabot, speaking of the Panthers, 47-7 over Little Rock Central. Bryant, big over North Little Rock, 63-7. Rogers and Harbor, talk about that game, man. All kinds of offense. Another 70-point game that we have on the year. 70-42 did the Mounties take down the Wildcats. Bentonville West, 57-30 over Fort Smith Northside. Then Bentonville, 38-0 over Springdale. Bentonville just continuing to click on all cylinders after that slow start in non-conference play. Then Fayetteville, 42-0 over Rogers Heritage. So we kind of know what's going in the West. I guess Bentonville is going to be the top seed. We know that much. So we've only got one thing left to figure out in the Central as we go to our – if I can find – why am I having trouble finding this here? Okay, so as we go to our rundown, finally there, I was getting a little confused. Buck James makes his return to Bryant and what we knew was going to be a slobber knocker of a game since the season ended last year. This game's always good. But here's the deal, Kevin, and we've talked about this many different times. Conway maybe has the best team that it's had probably in the last, despite all those semifinal runs. When you think about, and I know Wesley Tapp has come in for Grayson Wilson, the Arkansas commit, this is possibly one of the better teams when you think about, especially defensively for Conway. Yeah. Now, they have not played the schedule that Bryant has. Let's just go, especially when you think about non-conference. But this could be one of the better teams that Conway brings in. And again, this is Buck James's first trip back to Everett Field since he left Bryant to go to Conway. But that's the big question. Can Conway get over the mental hump, as they have not beaten Bryant since 2014?
Yeah, and the rumbling started coming about last week. And look, we can't fault. Look, Conway played Bentonville on September the 6th, and Bentonville, that team is not what Bentonville is right now. They dispatched of Marion. Marion is playing for a 6A East championship this week. So while it wasn't on the level of Bryant's non-conference schedule, it's still a good schedule. Jonesboro, Bentonville, and Marion. So, all playoff teams. So many people, and it's hard to put this game into words because everybody's been looking forward to it. It's been circled. The players, the coaches can say everything they want to about, we take it week by week, one by one. Okay, yeah, now we can put all that aside. They got through their coach speak. It's on. All right, yeah. So, what does the loser get out of this? Okay, the loser still gets a first-round bye. The only problem is they'll be put on the side of the bracket as Bentonville, okay? The winner will be put on the side of the bracket as Fayetteville. So those are the 4 teams that are going to get a bye in 7A. You got Bentonville and Fayetteville from the West, Conway and Bryant in no particular order from the Central. So it just sets up that way. I think, and we don't know if Grayson Wilson's going to be back or not. Buck James did call into the scoreboard show. Wesley Tapp had another amazing performance. The backfield for Conway, over 300 yards between those 2 running backs on only like 25 carries. I mean, they just shredded that defense of Little Rock Christian. So it's going to be a fun game. The last 2 years, these two teams have played in Conway. So it's going to be different with it in Bryant this year. I'm looking forward to it, and I know you guys are too. It's going to be the buzz game of the week. Big surprise. It's the one it should be. It's what everybody's been looking forward to in Central Arkansas all year. But, going through and looking what, possible matchups, PA and Springdale Harbor, round 1. Those 2 teams have played non-conference the last few years until PA, of course, moved into Class 7A. Southwest and Rogers, Springdale and Cabot. That's probably the most intriguing first-round matchup. And then possibly 5-4 upset Bentonville West over Little Rock Christian. Bentonville West is playing at a higher caliber of what we expected those last few weeks. Front end of the schedule was tough. Back end, they're doing a lot better right now, scoring 57 against Fort Smith Northside last Friday night. Trey Thompson had a phenomenal night. So, look out for the Wolverines going into the playoffs.
And the PA Little Rock Christian game this week is intriguing just mainly because you think about how this rivalry has gone, and really up until last year, PA had owned that series. I mean, and not just won the games, dominated the majority of them. So PA has shown, particularly in their loss to Bryant, I know that things didn't go well against Conway, but I think PA showed in their loss to Bryant that they can hang with those upper echelon teams in Class 7A. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing for Little Rock Christian here is what can they prove since they've done decent in 7A, just like we thought they were going to compete.
The Cabot win was good.
The Cabot win was good, especially since it was a comeback victory. It was the opening round of conference play, so they really needed that. And then, but things didn't go well against Bryant. Things didn't go well. I don't know what happened to our deal here. Things didn't go. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, guys. I think my computer is having technical difficulties. But so that's the thing for Little Rock Christian here is they want to prove, yes, they've shown that they can play in 7A like we all expected. But those upper echelon teams, that's where they've struggled there. And they've got a chance to do it against a PA. Of course, in a rivalry game, you always have to think about throwing records out the window.
Yeah, and last year's game was 55-13. We talked after Conway beat PA. When was the last time PA scored only 12 points in a game? Well, last year they scored 13 against Little Rock Christian in that first conference game, which Little Rock Christian just wiped the field with them. So I do think PA has the advantage this year. I do think they're a little bit better ball club. But Dustin Grimm has done a great job out at Little Rock Christian this year. They could make some noise in the playoffs. We'll just have to see. But, yeah, it's one of those throw all the records out. You got a lot of great rivalry games this week, Kyle, and that's what we always look forward to in Week 10, whether it be on a Thursday or Friday. So we'll throw that out there right now, guys, to our listeners. Look, there's going to be a handful of games, probably about 30, 35 games on Thursday, and then you're going to have the rest of the games on Friday. So we will know a lot about the playoffs, the brackets going into Friday, what needs to happen and where. Before that happens. So if you are going to your high school game this week, make sure you double check. It may be on a Thursday.
Then heading on down to Class 3A, we'll talk about this a little bit more as we wrap up the show.
Yeah, 6A.
What did I say? Did I say
3A?
Oh, man, I got to clean some things up today. 6A, we're going to talk, of course, more about this at the end of the show, but Greenwood playing with heavy hearts on Friday night, Kevin. They had a big win over Fort Smith Southside, 70-28. Of course, dealing with the tragic loss of Isaiah Arrington along with his mother and sister. This team was already a juggernaut, and now that they have someone to play for, it's crazy to think that the heights that they can go. They're already on pace to be one of the highest scoring offenses in state history, I believe, top 5, top 6. But just the way that this one went, Kane Archer, he broke his own record in the first half, passing for 8 touchdowns, 22 of 26, 365 yards. Of course, Grant Carnes took the opening kickoff back 98, 99 yards for a score.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then Fort Smith Southside, I want to definitely give credit to them for the pregame prayer that they had there at midfield as the teams met. There were so many teams that showed support throughout the week. So I wanted to touch on that real quick. And then, of course, we'll go into a little bit more of a tribute as we wrap up the show. Also in the 6A West, Mountain Home, 42-7 over Van Buren, a week removed from a dominant victory on the road over Lake Hamilton. Speaking of Lake Hamilton, man, this 6A West Conference has been interesting the last couple of weeks, Kevin. Lake Hamilton goes to Champion Stadium, takes down Shiloh Christian 35-28. Dylan Murphy with 191 yards and a score. Hayden Barton, a name we've mentioned many times, 88 yards on 15 carries, 4 touchdowns, multiple guys on the deal, which thank you, Lake Hamilton, for being one of the schools that also post your defensive stats. Multiple guys with double-digit tackles on the night. So, Kevin, I'll say this. We talked about Tommy Geller and just with his brand of football, the wing tee. He's not one of those stubborn coaches that's going to just run strictly that. They'll go out of the shotgun. He uses his personnel well. Just a massive response for the Lake Hamilton Wolves going on a long road trip. I would probably define that as an embarrassing loss. Not that Mountain Home is not an extremely quality opponent, but to get blanked at your own place, and especially being a good team, I would say that probably embarrassed them a little bit. So big time win there for the Wolves. Yeah,
they got hit in the mouth last week against Mountain Home, and that's what you do. You pick yourself up and pick yourself up by the bootstraps and go on about your business. As I'm watching that game on Friday night, I'm at the station and I'm like, Lake Hamilton, they got a chance to do this, and they just kept pulling away from Shiloh Christian. So now that sets up a weird scenario. Not really, but it's the triangle. So you could have a 3-way tie for second place in the 6A West, assuming Greenwood beats Mountain Home. Okay. So the 3 teams tied for second place would be Mountain Home, Shiloh Christian, Lake Hamilton. They've all lost to Greenwood, and then the 3 teams themselves have beat up on each other. We know Mountain Home beat Lake Hamilton, Shiloh Christian beat Mountain Home, and Mountain Home beat Lake Hamilton. Lake Hamilton beat Shiloh Christian. So it's the perfect triangle. So you got that in a lot of different classifications, and we'll go through that and touch on it. And this is why they have the point system. If you win a conference game, the max points you can get are 13 for a conference win. So it's paramount that you max out on your points. Mountain Home has in their 5 wins. Greenwood, of course, has. What Kane Archer did Friday night with 8 touchdowns in the first half, it's really comical because he's thrown 43 touchdowns through 9 games. He's only played in 6 drives of a second half all season. He's thrown 1 interception. He's got a few more rushing touchdowns, so I think he's got 47 or 49. He's definitely up there for Player of the Year in the state of Arkansas, no matter what publication you look at. He's on our primetime performers list on the Buzz every week for what he does in the first half. So Maddox Berry should send a thank you note to Coach Chris Young and Kane Archer and say thank you for letting me keep my record for longer than a week. Because if he would have played the second half, he would have thrown for 12 or 13 touchdowns. No, I have no doubt about that. He may get that shot this week against Mountain Home. Yeah, he may get to play the full game. They'll go out there and take care of business. I think Greenwood rolls right there. So 6A East, Catholic, it's a huge win over Marion. And you talk about, teams bouncing back. Week before, Catholic got embarrassed by Benton, 42-0. So Coach Richard Cochran and his guys bounced back, get a great win. Jackson England looked really good. They shut down Jalen Smith on Friday night, limited him to a season low in yardage. So you got to give Catholic an attaboy. They get a 2 thumbs up for the week. Benton, of course, is going to win that conference, assuming they beat Marion this week. If Marion wins, you got the perfect triangle again at the top of the 6A East. And then El Dorado, huge win over Jonesboro, 21-14 on Friday night. That sets up a showdown between Sheridan and El Dorado. Sheridan has to go to El Dorado. That will determine the bottom 3 seeds in the 6A East with El Dorado, Jonesboro, and Sheridan. We think El Dorado probably would be the 4, Jonesboro the 5, Sheridan the 6. That would set up some really interesting games. A lot to still be determined in that Class 6A in terms of who's going to play where and who's going to get the buys.
And that was what you just broke down there was kind of the moral of the talking about creating opportunities, because I don't think that many people saw Catholic beating Marion. Now, Catholic has been a great team all year and then suffered their first loss in a shutout to against Benton. But Marion just has really been probably, I would say, a little bit more of a surprise because they weren't really in some conversations that I heard being talked about with Benton, with Catholic, and it was kind of just really Catholic and Benton being there at the top. Not everybody, but just some. Yeah. So I think that that's where you look at just the top of the East there is that Marion still has an opportunity there, but Sheridan and El Dorado in the East is really intriguing just because we know that regardless of classification, once the playoffs begin, Kevin Kelly is more successful than just about any coach that's going to be in these as far as now Sheridan has nothing to do with what he did at PA, obviously. But as you get deeper and deeper into the season, players begin to more and more buy into what you're implementing in their program. Obviously, he's got arguably the best running back in the state in Stevens. And so just with, what a couple of weeks ago, he put up 200 on the ground and 200 receiving, just a phenomenal player. So the East is very – look, let's call it what it is. The 6As is Greenwoods until somebody else proves otherwise. But it's just really intriguing there, especially at the top, now that you had Catholic beating Marion last week. But then El Dorado, who has proven that it can get an upset at just about any time.
And score.
And score, exactly. And that's probably one of the more impressive things. You lose your star quarterback before the season. And what is Jacobs? I forget his first name every time. Cannon Jacobs. Definitely have to give him all the credit in the world. This was kind of like an Owen Miller type situation at Harding Academy. Was not expected to play until right before the season a couple of years ago when Cade Smith decided to focus on baseball. And, I'm not saying that El Dorado is having that kind of same success that Harding had, but just the way that it was such a short notice and is performing for these Wildcats and has them playing pretty well.
Yeah, and Cannon Jacobs he's the son of Elliot Jacobs, who coached at Parker's Chapel. Has been in South Arkansas. He was, of course, the quarterback at El Dorado right after I left. So 2000, 2001, I think he was a year behind me. Him staying in South Arkansas and raising his kids down there. Of course, the older son went to Parker's Chapel, then went to play college ball. So Cannon's going to have a lot of success. He's lefty, sophomore. Love the way he throws the ball, puts a lot of good touch on the ball, and lets his athletes do the work down there. So they scored 63 a couple of weeks ago against West Memphis. They were down early, came back, and just blew it out of the water at the end. They beat Camden Fairview earlier in the year. That's a huge win for them. So this El Dorado team's really kind of coming into focus at the right time. It was a huge win against Jonesboro on Friday night, showing they could do it with defense. And that's the road, the longest trip in the state. El Dorado to Jonesboro is the longest trip in the state this year for a road team. So huge win for the Wildcats, and they have it set up this week at Memorial Stadium in Union County. Sheridan has to come down there. El Dorado wins the get-home game. That's big for them.
Then on down to class, had to make sure my mic wasn't muted for once. On down to Class 5A, Robinson 33-14 over Pine Bluff. How about those Maumelle Hornets, Kevin, on a 5-game win streak? They started 2-2, like I said, won 5 in a row, beat Searcy in overtime 24-23. We'll play Robinson for the conference title this week. Whitehall 46-13 over Jacksonville. BB blanks Watson Chapel 41-0. And Kevin, I know Watson Chapel's struggling pretty bad right now, but to hold a team to -1 total yards like BB did, that is quite impressive. I don't care who you're playing. Valley View in a tight one over Nettleton, 28-20. Harding Academy, as we said last week, and kind of have mentioned it over the past week, those Wildcats really starting to heat up. I know Coach Evans called into the scoreboard show the other night, was very pleased with the way that his line is playing, and anytime he says that, that's where it all starts. You know that things can get really special, so we'll see what happens. Arkansas High continues keeping its postseason hopes alive with a 55-20 win over Hope. Camden Fairview 34-6 over Hot Springs. Alma big over Pea Ridge 42-14. Greenbrier squeaks past Harrison 35-28. Also Valonia squeaks past Morrilton 30-27. Farmington 49-0 over Clarksville. And then also the Parkview Patriots. Kevin, haven't talked a whole lot about them really since non-conference play because they've done what they are expected to do every week. But as we've seen with very successful teams is when you win as much as Parkview does, and you see this at every level, if you're not blowing people out, people start asking questions. What's going on with this? I say got past Magnolia. It was still a pretty substantial lead.
It was 21-0 at half, and Coach Bolden was upset. Yeah.
That tells you everything you needed to know, and that just shows you the kind of expectations that they have for this program. But I said that this was going to be a close game. I certainly thought it was going. I thought Parkview was going to win it, but I thought it would be a lot closer. But the Patriots take down Hot Springs Lakeside to kick off the week on Halloween, kick off week 9, 38-12. Emmanuel Bunting, this young man's a good player, Kevin. 22 of 26, 322 yards, 3 touchdowns. The Arkansas commit Cam Settles, 16 carries for 163 yards and 2 scores. The big news from that game, as reported by our man at the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, Sam Lane. So Amarian Robinson, the Oklahoma commit, some consider possibly the best overall player in the 2025 class for Arkansas. He was diagnosed with a high ankle sprain. And we know what, especially for someone of his position, really just sports in general, how much of a headache those can be. So that is something to watch, especially with a huge game, which going into, we'll go ahead and kind of use this to talk about our games this week. Parkview's got a big one with Camden Fairview. Of course, Nick Vaughn, the former defensive coordinator for the Patriots, now the head coach at Fairview. The Cardinals having a very good season. That's one of the top games this week. You look at Wynn at Nettleton for playoff implications also as well. Greenbrier and Bologna. Bologna could have a bit of a trap game there just because of the history with that rivalry, one to watch out for. But all eyes, or many, as far as those that follow 5A in particular, will be on that South matchup between the Cardinals and the Patriots.
Yeah, when you have Junie Atkins and Trent Haygood in the backfield, you can do a lot of things. They shut down Hot Springs on Friday night, 34-6. I had to apologize to Coach Nick Vaughn because I got a score wrong. Look, it happens. I was watching the live feed, and Hot Springs had it 35-18, and I'm like, what? That makes zero sense. Sometimes when you look at a score when it's been reported, and you're like, is this right? And there was some of that on Friday night. It goes back to 2 weeks ago when we had scores that didn't come in. So apologize to the Camden Fairview Cardinals faithful down there in South Arkansas. But, they can win this game and get a share of the conference title. They would be in a triangle with Lakeside, Parkview, and Camden at that point. So they lose, they're going to be the 3 seed and play Harding Academy in the first round. Talk about matchups. That could be an absolute that would be one of the best ones in Class 5A for sure. So win to Nettleton, that's going to determine the 3 and the 4 seed in the 5A East. After Nettleton gave Valley View all they wanted, it was 14-14 at halftime. They had shut Drew Gartman down for the most part. Valley View had a couple of turnovers. They had only had 3 turnovers total coming into week 9. One of them was an interception by the 3rd-string quarterback, and they had lost a couple of fumbles, one of them with the second team. So the starters had only turned the ball over 1 time through 8 games, and Nettleton was able to force a couple. Maddox Hampton played really good at quarterback. So Nettleton could give people problems, and they look like they could be a good 3 seed coming out of that 5A East, win under Clay Toddy, playing well this year. But, and going back to Maumelle, you got to give Coach Maupin and the Hornets credit where credit's due. And I can stop saying de facto conference championship. I know Steve Henson is excited about that because this is the real conference championship. It's Pulaski County Special School District 5A Central Championship Showdown. Boom! Yeah, Joe T. Robinson and Maumelle. It doesn't get any better than that. Players know each other. Coaches know each other. It's, it's like family getting together. They're going to beat each other up. So Searcy and BB playing for that 3 and 4 seed in the 5A Central. Searcy, of course, almost lost their last 2 ball games. They did lose them. They got beat by Robinson 2 weeks ago, got beat by Maumelle. Outstanding play defensively by Maumelle. You saw the jump pass was coming. I'm watching it online. I'm like, here comes the jump pass. Searcy motions a guy out to the left, do the Wildcat snap, and he runs up a couple steps, jump pass. Maumelle knocked it down to win 24-23. Got to give it to Coach Zach Clark. It's intestinal fortitude to go for it for 2 and put the game away in overtime. So outstanding performance there. And, yeah, Bologna and Greenbrier for the 2 seed in the 5A West. Morrilton all of a sudden looking like they could be the 4 seed going into the state playoffs. That could be something because you would have Morrilton and Joe T. Robinson in the first round.
Yeah, and Morrilton just a couple of weeks they were 7-0 going into that Farmington game. So how quickly think? But I'll tell you though, I mean, I think that Coach McNabb would tell you maybe getting a little bit beat up, for a couple of games, but you want to do that before the postseason. My sophomore year, I tell this story all the time. We were 9-0, went into a 4-5 Mayflower team and got our butts kicked, and that was probably the best thing that ever happened to us. So sometimes it's better that way, just to go ahead and figure out some things on the verge of playoffs. You just got to make sure that you recover from that and try to not let it happen again. So. On down to Class 4A, Lincoln 56-13 over Berryville. Gentry, I'll tell you what, Kevin, Gentry Pioneers without their quarterback. That's massive over Prairie Grove. They've been doing it without Talon Williams over the past few weeks. So, I mean, the way that they've responded, definitely got to tip your hats to them. Under first-year coach Tyler Clark. So they're doing a really good job. Also, too, I got to give some props to Gravett. Last week I went on here and we had talked about how they're probably not ready to compete. That was we've said this about multiple games this year. You're not looking at Gravett to win this game. How will they compete in it? And they competed as well as anybody has competed against Elkins this year. I do believe, Kevin, this Gravett team over the next few years is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Maybe a little bit ahead of schedule, at least as far as some of us like myself were concerned. I didn't think that this was going to be a competitive game. Gravett proved me and others wrong. So credit to them. This could be a team to really watch in the postseason here with the way that they played against the Elks, especially on the road. Mills 49-7 over CAC. Lone Oak 45-26 over Little Rock Hall. How about those Heber Springs Panthers? 49-46 over Forest City in the final seconds. A 45-yard pass to Liam Buffalo to Logan Rutledge sealed it. Kevin, you got to I talked to Coach Swinton from Reggie from Forest City over the weekend. And, they've had a lot of tough losses this year, has Forest City. But that's what I told. I know this one probably stings the most just because they had Heber Springs, who's going to be the 2 seed, beat. But that's what I told him. I said, man, you think about it. You're a one-win. Not when he wasn't there last year. You're a one-win team last year. This team's won, 5 games prior to this year over the past 3 years or whatever it was. You're not just, yes, you've had to overcome some big deficits, but they're a play away here, a play or two away there. So, I mean, this is a team that could possibly be. Now, against, some of the like the Mills, those games didn't go well. But you think about their first game against Southside, how they hung with Southside, and they've just had to come back from, 1 point, had to come back from multiple deficits. So, credit to Forest City, what they've done there, but also, too, just Heber Springs for not giving up on that play. That was a great pass. It was 45 yards, like I said, Prayer that won the game. So, speaking of Southside, 49-13 over Truman. Pocahontas, 26-14 over Blytheville. Mena remains undefeated and has a big one this week, which we'll touch on here in a few moments. 24-7 over Clinton. They're 9-0 are the Bearcats. Dardanelle, who they will be playing this week, big over Pottsville, 41-14. Ozark, 48-42 over Lamar. Ozark has just been banged up with injuries this year, really trying to make a push at the end. Probably the most shocking score in 4A this weekend, Kevin. 51-14 Ashdown over Bauxite at the pit on Bauxite senior night. Yeah. Also, Malvern 26-18 over Nashville. I want to say this real quick. So, Malvern remains undefeated. Nashville, look, let's call it what it is, because there's public stuff out there. They'll see it on Facebook still to this day. There are plenty that were not happy with the Sean Jackson hire at Nashville.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's still plenty in that position, even though they're playing pretty dang good football. I said before, I know that people are going to look at that 1-8 record at Haytime, Missouri, and then the school he was at before that, things didn't go well. But this is a guy that took Crossett to the playoffs, twice, had 2 really good seasons. And look what Crossett is now. No offense to them. I'm just saying, just give people a chance, man. That's the thing that I think the lesson that you got to learn here is I don't know what may be going on behind the scenes at Nashville. Don't really care. That's their business, not mine. But this is a team that's won 4 of their last 5 games, and dang near they competed as much harder than many people expected with Malvern. So, there's not a lot of positivity, at least that I have seen coming out of that program. But just that's what I would urge the Scrapper Nation to do, man. I mean, I feel like that you're having probably a little bit much better season than many expected. Also in the 4A7, Arkadelphia 56-6 over Genoa Central. In conference play, Kevin, the Badgers have not allowed more than 17 points in a game, had multiple shutouts, just dominating right now across the board. Stuttgart, speaking of Hail Marys.
Look out.
Was it Kane Price to Deontay? I know Kane.
Deontay Clark, yeah.
No surprise there. Deontay Clark's an electrifying player, 40 yards. So we had 2 Hail Marys to basically close it out in Class 4A this week. DeWitt put 70 on Hamburg in a 70-39 win. Warren big over Helena, 57-22. Also, Monticello takes down Cross at 48-7. So, Kevin, this week you've got Arkadelphia at Malvern for the 4A7 conference title. Gentry at Gravett in a very important game. Gentry 8-1, Gravett 8-1. Both of their only losses are to Lincoln, I believe, or Lincoln to Elkins, I believe. So I think that is correct because they're both 8-1. So that's got to be it. And then the big one in the 4A4, Mina, who's 9-0 at Dardanelle, 8-1. Dardanelle's only loss to number 1 Elkins. So we've got some big time matchups in 4A.
Yeah, you got 6 conferences in Class 4A, and 3 of them have conference championships in Week 10 this week, like Kyle just mentioned. Lone Oak at Mills in the 2, Mina at Dardanelle in the 4, and Arkadelphia at Malvern in the 7. So a lot to look forward to. Going back to Bauxite real quick. Bauxite plays Haskell Harmony Grove this week. If Harmony Grove wins that game, Bauxite does not make the playoffs. You talk about a team that has underwhelmed and underperformed this year. Bauxite was a top 5 pick in Class 4A coming in with all the weapons they had with Wimberley. Of course, they've had injuries, run amok. You know, Eli Perry, unfortunately, is out for the year. He missed the first few games, after he got hurt in game 1. So it's tough for the Miners and what they went through on Friday night, embarrassed by Ashdown at home. So that's something that, if they want to make the playoffs, they got to beat the rival on Friday night this week. So Mills, we keep saying, okay, what are they going to do and how are they going to be? And they just keep taking care of business. Elijah Moody, one of the best freshmen in the state in the class of 2027, 28. Yep, 28. So looking forward to that. The Dardanelle game, I'm really looking forward to that one against Mina. That's at Dardanelle and Coach Phil Vega. Creed Vega's over 1,000 yards rushing for the season, over 1,600 yards passing for the season. He could have another 2,000, 1,000 season. Those are rare in high school football. Kudos to Warren. They clinched their conference championship this week, the 8-4A. So, looking ahead to the playoffs, depending on what happens between Mina and Dardanelle, Elkins could play them in the second round. So the loser of that game will play Elkins in the second round. Of course, Dardanelle played them earlier this year. Mina has not played them. It's just kind of crazy. There's 2 teams that get a bye in the 4A and 3A. This year, the byes are with the Conference 4 and Conference 2. So the winner between Mina and Dardanelle gets a bye. And assuming if Mills beats Lone Oak, Mills would get the bye in Conference 2. If Mills loses to Lone Oak, we do have a 3-way scenario once again between Heber Springs, which come out of nowhere, Mills, and Lone Oak. So a lot to look forward to in Class 4A. CAC and Forest City for that 4 or 5 spot in the 2-4A. Congratulations, Coach Reggie Swinton. They clinched a playoff berth last week, but CAC is playing a lot better of late. JD Plummer, they got a lot of young guys over there. That should be a shootout. Expect one of those 49-46 games like Forest City had this past week.
Yeah, CAC also playing with a freshman. We've seen a few freshmen play this year and then over, which we'll talk about a dynamic freshman here in Class 3A in a second. But Jackson Plumley, JD's son, has been moved. I moved him up around the beginning of conference play, I believe. So, yeah, a lot of young talent there at CAC that, had to replace quite a few people over the offseason. So, down to Class 3A, Mansfield. I guess they're the conference champion out of the 3A1. They're going to get the top seed, a 66-20 win over Greenland. Now, the team that they beat last week for the first time in over 40 years, Boonville, with a huge 48-45 comeback win.
Huge.
With Dax Goff. I know our guy Harold at the River Valley, I guess the River Valley Democrat Gazette, wrote a great article over this talking about how Dax Goff was there in attendance. Of course, Harding played on Thursday night. Dax Goff was in attendance. And Hunter Warren channeled his inner Dax Goff.
Yeah, he did.
31 carries, 303 yards, and 4 touchdowns. What a performance from him. Quitman, the Fighting DJ Mars, as I like to call him, 54-30 over Mountain View. They're playing some good ball right now, Kevin. That's a team I think, I know, like, It's really just about, can they keep a strong defense, because their offense is going to score points. But look out for the Bulldogs. They could maybe hurt some feelings here along the way. Also, Salem survives Mayflower 28-27 to give the Eagles their first loss. Salem has had some tough losses against a really brutal schedule, especially there in the non-conference play. I know this is huge especially for their psyche to get this right there on the verge of the playoffs. Also, Newport 52-14 over Hoxie. Walnut Ridge 47-21 over Harrisburg. Osceola over Piggott 48-6. Glen Rose in a tight one with Paris 25-21. We had a couple of tight ones here at the top of the 3A4. Also, Jessieville 20-14 over Perryville.
Overtime.
That was an overtime fun finish right there. Harmony Grove OC 62-0 over Horatio. Prescott 54-28 over Smackover. They rebound to the Curly Wolves after losing to Bismarck last week. Speaking of Bismarck, they squeak past Center Point. Do not have a letdown after a huge performance. They take down the Knights 33-24. McGee squeaks past Dumas 24-20. And then Fordyce Horizon, the game that we had the pleasure of being on site for the Buzz Game of the Week, 30-28 over Horizon. And Kevin, what was really intriguing about this game, and really the turning point, at the end of the first half, with about 19 seconds left, Fordyce goes for the 2-point conversion. Horizon actually made a good defensive play. The defensive back bats it, what he thought was down, actually batted it up in the air, and Fordyce caught it for the 2-point conversion. So 2-point win. How crucial was that right there for a team that doesn't kick extra points? This was a game that was as good as advertised. Incredible crowd on hand. And I got to give credit to both Fordyce and Horizon for what they did, as far as, yes, it was a very physical game, but you saw a lot of mutual respect. Yeah, it was heated. People were talking trash back and forth, but these two teams are so well coached. They're so very disciplined, and that's why they came into this game 8-0. But I will say, Cadillac Ellison, bigger than just about anybody on the field at 14, 15 years old. It looked like that he was a little banged up at the beginning of the game on the first or second drive, but it was just back and forth. Chandler Reeves, what a dog for Horizon. Both of these defenses played really, really well. It was the best game that we called on the Buzz this year, and it certainly lived up to the billing.
Yeah, that's what you want. And Fordyce can't they can't rest on the laurels thinking they accomplished everything they wanted to with that 2-point win over Horizon, because they got McGee this week. McGee beats Fordyce, and we got a 3-way tie for the 8-3A. That's just we expected that early in the season, going down to the wire. Looking forward to week 9 and week 10. And it's the way it's played out. So really looking forward to seeing that. Cadillac Ellison, I got to see him earlier in the year, the game before they played Mineral Springs, and just blew him out of the water. He looks the part. He's going to be one of those that sticks around for the next 3 years after this, that's going to be able to take Tim Rogers. And it was fun watching him, celebrate. He's a Fordyce lifer. He's been, 10, 12 years as the head coach right now, won a couple of state titles, and they're back in the race right now. Bismarck looked good on Friday night, getting a win over Center Point. Keithley, 236 yards on 9 carries, 3 touchdowns. The Lions beat Center Point 33-24 to capture their conference title. He also had an interception on defense. So Glen Rose, good win over Paris. That helped, secure their number 1 seed and a bye in the first round of the Class 3A playoffs. Them and Bismarck will get the byes there. Osceola still rolling, Rivercrest, Newport, Walnut Ridge. Closer game than what they expected against Harrisburg. Harrisburg was actually up in that game for a little bit. So Walnut Ridge kind of limping into the playoffs after, high expectations coming into the year. The 2-3A, Salem, huge win for those guys. So now you got 4 teams in the 2-3A that are 4-2. You got Quitman, Atkins, Melbourne, and Salem. You got Quitman and Salem this week. That should be a heck of a game. That's at Quitman. Should be a shootout. If you know DJ Mar's team, they can score. They're averaging right at 39.5 points a game this year, right at 40 points. So them and Salem should be a shootout. Those teams just beat up on each other. Mayflower's been the one that's been unscathed so far until Friday night. Salem gets a huge win, and then, great bounce back job. And you talked about, Hunter Warren coming out 300 yards. That's only the second time a Booneville Bearcat has rushed for 300 yards in a game. The other one, of course, was Dax Goff. That gives them the 2 seed. Of course, the last time they were the 2 seed in 2015, they won a state title. Charleston's going to give people trouble. Carter Little, outstanding performance, over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns on the night, giving them a chance to make a playoff run here in 2 weeks.
And then down in Class 2A, Bigelow, the defending state champions, 45-16 over Johnson County Westside. Conway Christian, 43-0 over Hector. Mount Ida, 47-3 over Mountainburg. Cross County, 40-28 over Mark Tree. EPC with a big game this week against Mark Tree, 36-30 over Desark. Dirks, 18-8 over Mineral Springs. Junction City, 35-28 over Lafayette County. Murfreesboro, 42-8 over Spring Hill. Bearden, 29-14 over Poen. Carlisle, 61-8 over England. And then Hazen, who Carlisle will be playing this week in a huge rivalry matchup, 54-14 over Hampton. And Kevin, we haven't talked a whole lot about – we've mentioned Conway Christian some this year, especially after that they escaped that Mount Ida victory. But 9-0 on the year, got a huge one against Bigelow, which Bigelow started off slow and wasn't really a surprise to a lot of people, just with all that they lost and played a tough schedule there. But this is for all the marbles in the 2A1, which has kind of become we've accustomed to over the last few years.
Yeah, a good buddy of mine is going to be officiating that game Friday night. He reached out to me. He said, "Is it going to be a good one?" I said, "Absolutely." 22-15 last year, Bigelow got the win over Conway Christian. It's just a matter of Bigelow's offense. They're the one that have struggled so far this year. The defense has always been there. They really kind of busted it open 2 weeks ago against Mount Ida, scoring 35 or going into the third quarter in that game, held on for a 35-21 win. So it should be a knockdown, drag-out fight. I believe it's at Conway Christian this week. I think so, maybe. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's at Conway Christian. So great atmosphere. Conway Christian, chance to go undefeated in the regular season. Something I believe that's the first time that will have happened in football for those guys. So looking around, EPC beating Desark was huge, 34-30. That throws a wrench in the 3-2A. EPC has Mark Tree this week. Desark has McCrory. EPC wins. They're the conference champion in the 3. Yeah, that's the 2. I had my schedule wrong here. In the 2-2A. Down in the 3, Junction City, just kind of really shocking. They only beat Lafayette County, 35-28? Yeah, 35-28. That was really kind of shocking for me. Murfreesboro handling business. They'll get to take on Mineral Springs, a game you got to go see last year in attendance. So a lot to set up. The 4 seeds have really kind of set themselves up. Bearden beating Poen on Friday night, 29-14. Did Carlisle break Poen? Carlisle's broken a few teams this year. I know Poen has had some injuries of late, but they're right now they're going to be the 4 seed out of the 4-1A. That's going to be tough first round matchup if Poen can be healthy by the time the playoffs get here. But looks like all 4 seeds in each conference have really kind of taken their toll, or they've really kind of lined up the way we thought they would. Just Carlisle, man. Carlisle's just so good. And
dude, they've got athletes that, it's you talk about just like Ken Carter at Mark Tree. Like there's so many. Yeah. TJ Hodges, you can point out, but Kevin, it's just I've covered 2 of their games this year, and they're just loaded everywhere.
Yeah,
just everywhere.
Hazen, Joe Basenka's done a great job. Look, they play Carlisle Friday night. It's going to be a packed house, but I don't think it'll be close. Carlisle will probably win by 30. But that's not to take any away from Joe Basenka and what they've done down there, because he's done a great job considering what they came into this year with and how they've bounced back after losing early. They've won, 4 straight, I think, 5-1 record. So in conference play, they're going to make the playoffs and have a chance to do something. But Carlisle, them in Greenwood are right there in terms of nobody's really chasing them right now. It's just them in the field.
Yeah. No doubt. And that's kind of what, we talked about last week. And I probably slided when I brought up Junction City and who was the team we talked about? Junction City and Murfreesboro.
Yeah.
Or no, I'm sorry. It was Murfreesboro and there were two teams that we talked about that I can't remember, but I think I might have left Conway Christian on that. You also had mentioned Des Arc, who took that loss to East Poinsett County. So I think that's probably, Conway Christian's got a lot to prove this week. I mean, I think over the last few years, they've done what they had to do in the regular season. Now, they haven't beaten Bigelow since 2019, I think it was. And that's kind of where they're measured as far, not the success of the season, but just to be able to get that 1 seed will obviously be massive there. But, I'm kind of with you. Carlisle has they've been to the state title game. Well, they won it in 1960. That wasn't sanctioned by the AAA at that time. But since then, they've had multiple runner-up teams. You think about if Barton wouldn't have been on its run in the 90s, Carlisle would probably have a state championship game. 2011, they ran up against a team that and Kenneth Dixon, that nobody was going to stop. And then they ran up kind of the similar situation. Them and Hazen in 2022, the two most dominant defenses in Class 2A. And then really just Hazen was of course, that year, Carlisle was really, really reliant on J.J. Sullivan. They had some other pieces, but it was really J.J. Sullivan, 25, 30 yards per game. Meanwhile, you had Luke King, and on Hazen's side, you had Braylon Anderson that went off in that state finals game. This year, it's just really, unless there's just a surplus of injuries, and Lord forbid, you don't want it to happen. But if Carlisle has one injury at the skill position, now Ty Tanksley, that would not be one that would be ideal. But if they were, Lord forbid, hypothetically speaking, to have one skill player go down, they're going to be okay because they're just that loaded, and that's usually what you have to worry about the most in Class 2A.
That's exactly right, because they're going both ways. They're two platooning it out there. They're going both ways. Ironman football, not two platoon, excuse me. So they're Ironman football. Yeah. And it's just they've been close. And we talked about that with BJ Green, who's the superintendent now, had been the athletic director. He was the defensive coordinator under Scott Waymeyer. It starts from the top down in that community. Gary Wilson had been there as an assistant, now as the head coach. They know what it takes. And they're just and they talk about being a team of destiny and being right there on a path to greatness this season. That's what they're doing this season. It's been fun to watch, throughout the whole season. And they won 61-6 the other night. So, through 9 games, they're averaging right at 50 points, giving up 10 on the season. It's just been a lot of fun to watch. And they get to finish it up against Hazen and then go to the playoffs.
And on down to volleyball, probably the reason why many our viewers saw me distracted there. I've got to come clean. I was listening to what you were saying, but I was also marking down the volleyball results because my dumb butt forgot to do that before we started recording. But luckily, I was able to do most from memory. So Jeff Halpern and I are going to have a podcast on this. So we'll just go through the scores real quick. So Conway 3-1 over Bentonville. MVP, and that one was Madison Durden. Shiloh Christian 3-0. The Lady Saints get over the hump. Or I'm sorry, they were they got over the hump, won a state championship. They had been there multiple times in Class 4A, but just couldn't get over the Brooklyn hump. The Lady Saints sweep Greenbrier 3-0. Bella Bonino earned the MVP in that one. Also, Brooklyn, speaking of, 3-0 over a very familiar foe and win. Evan Paulsgrove got the most valuable player in that one. Paris 3-1 over CAC with Claire Zeiler wrapping up MVP honors. And then last but not least, Hackett finishes a 36-0 season with a 3-0 sweep of England. Michaelin Freeman earned MVP honors in that one. So like I said, you can check out Jeff. We have the recap stories on all of those on naturalstatesports.com, as well as Twitter/X and Facebook. And then Jeff Halpert and I will have a podcast out on that later this week. Now we're going to wrap up the show. Not something that we envisioned discussing this week, Kevin, but we definitely want to make sure that, we mention this because last week we released our podcast on Tuesday mornings every week. And Tuesday evening going into Wednesday, we got just, I don't even really know the words, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking news that Isaiah Arrington, that's also known as Ike, star wide receiver for Greenwood, along with his mother and little sister, passed away in a house fire. just unimaginable. You kind of see right behind me here. I've got a picture of my daughter I keep on my desk, just kind of as a reminder every time when I'm working of why I do what I do. So this obviously hits harder when you're a parent, but I didn't know Ike other than just a couple of or a couple of Twitter messages here and there. But when as covering these kids and these teams as much as we do, and especially a team like Greenwood that's had the amount of success that it has, and we cover Coach Young and this team so extensively, there's so many great things that we get to see and experience in what we do. But this one, it messed up my entire Wednesday as it did so many others. Just so heartbroken for this family, for this community. But it was so great to see the amount of statewide support that town and that family got last Friday night in particular.
Absolutely. And, I haven't talked to a lot of people about this, but it really hit home on two fronts. One, like Lucy's yours, Tessa's mine, and Tessa's 4 years old. Little Vivian, she was 5, was about to turn 6. Ike's younger sister. And I knew Isaiah through baseball and football. Got to talk to him quite a bit last year as Greenwood was making their run the last 2 years in baseball and, of course, in football. It brought back a lot of memories from my junior year at Mills when during basketball season we lost Grant and Mayon. Of course, I didn't play basketball, but was really close to a lot of those guys. My best friend, Brian Langston, who, has been my best friend since we were kids. We woke up one Saturday morning. It was the day after Valentine's Day, and he had got in a situation and lost his life down in Pine Bluff he was shot, and it kind of racked everybody's world that day. We woke up to it, and we didn't know what was going on. So it really brought back a lot of memories, and to see the outpouring of support just shows you how tight-knit athletes are, and seeing the G's on the back of the helmets, Fayetteville running out with the G, holding it up. The thing that brought a tear to my eye was when Grant Carnes took that 98-yard kickoff back. Chris Young said after the game, it was like he had Ike Arrington out there clearing the way, blocking. He had, angel wings on the back of him is what they posted. It was, Randy and I on the scoreboard show talked about if Tim Terry would actually call in Friday night. We didn't want to push him to do it. It's one of those things that we talked about, when do you bombard a team and a staff, players that, are going through the grieving process? Let them do the things. There were some articles written last week. If that was done to, put a journalist's name out there, whatever. I think, let them grieve and let them go about their process. They wanted to play that game for Ike and his family Friday night. And Tim Terry called in. We talked to him, and we made the statement for the rest of the season, Greenwood will not have a player of the game. It will be Isaiah Arrington from here on out. So that was something that Randy and I wanted to do just because it needed to be done. Greenwood has always been a tight-knit community. And if you talk to Kane Archer, he's always said, look, I have the best receiving core in the state. And I wholeheartedly believe that they do. And losing Ike just brought them together. It's not going to be surprising if they roll everybody from here on out.
No doubt. And, I do. And I want to close it out by mentioning I haven't reached out to Coach Young yet. I kind of wanted to, let things play out, and I plan on calling him this week. But I want to give a special shout out to those coaches. There's so many other adult figures in these kids' lives who think about just the grief that not just Coach Young, but that entire staff is going through.
Brandon Burr, the baseball coach. I talked to him last week.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And not only is that hard on them, but they're having to pick themselves up to be strong for these kids and for these players. I can't even imagine I truly can't. And so, we want to make sure we give the proper credit there, just because yes, there's people that have experienced tragedies like this, but that's not really something that they prepare you for always when you sign up to be a coach or a teacher or whatever the case may be. It's really just unexplainable, but the best way to honor those memories is to do exactly what we saw last week. You know, like you said, the Fayetteville carrying out the G flag and just so many other incredible gestures that we saw from multiple other communities. You know, and that's the cool thing about it is a lot of times, yes, you're rivals, you want to beat this team or that team, but at the end of the day, it's a freaking game, man. And lives are way more important than this. So definitely wanted to make sure that we gave that its proper respect, and certainly our hearts continue to go out to the Greenwood community and the Arrington and Medrano families. So we are just we're crushed over this too. Like I said, Kevin, you know, these kids, we cover them, especially a team like Greenwood that we've covered for so long, that's been successful for so long. So yeah, I know that's not the most uplifting things to finish off a podcast, but again, it was uplifting to see just the response from so many around the state. But next week, Kevin and I will break down. We'll have all the playoff matchups by this time, all set in stone. So we'll kind of talk about some of let's call it what it is. Round one is not always the most intriguing, but you might have because there's going to be some 3 and 4 seeds.
You'll have a few
at the beginning of you'll have a few of those that'll be intriguing, but we'll talk about maybe some of our dark horses in each class and just kind of go through that as we have the brackets out. Again, I want to remind everybody, if you haven't subscribed, do that on YouTube, as well as hit that notification bell so you're notified when we release an episode. Also, Apple, Spotify, iHeart Radio, we are there. For Kevin Bohannon and all of us here at Natural State Sports, my name is Kyle Sutherland. We will see you next week.